Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. Her name is Margo Nash, Nash. She just published this year, 2026, July 2026, a revised, an updated and expanded edition of her book. The full title is The Politics of Murder, the Power and Ambition Behind What's Known as the Altar Boy Murder Case. And it's published by Wild Blue Press, where you can find the book, and also on Amazon. But it's about a case that took place a long time ago today, like 30 years, 1995. And the person who was convicted, his name was Edward or Eddie O'Brien. It took place in Somerville, Massachusetts. But there's a lot to talk about this case, and there's a lot of controversy. He was only 15, so there's a lot of issues about is whether he's an adult or should be tried as an adult, things like that. But Margo Nash is a retired attorney. She practiced in Massachusetts for over 30 years. She was appointed in the case to act as Eddie's guardian ad litem. She can explain that term. And she knows him personally, and she's convinced that there was a miscarriage of justice in this case. And she's had access to all of his legal files, attended all of his hearings and trials, and has remained involved in the case for over 21 years. And she's
31.
Pardon? 31?
31 years.
31, excuse me. Review of the entire file, transcripts, lab reports, police reports, correspondence, tapes, related evidentiary material, and all this stuff is that he's been wrongfully convicted, and she can make her case and talk about this book, The Politics of Murder. So, Margo Nash, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
For people who haven't heard your name or heard this case, maybe you can talk about yourself and what led up to your involvement in what's known as the Altar Boy murder case.
Well, as you said, I was appointed by the court to act as Eddie's guardian ad litem, which you don't usually see in a juvenile delinquency case. You usually see that in a child custody case, and it's someone who's trying to advocate for the best interests of the child. And the reason that he had a guardian ad litem was because his father was the first person on the murder scene. And so the district attorney put his father on his witness list, and he never did call him, but that set up a situation where his father was going to be a witness ostensibly against him for the prosecution. So they appointed me to be his advocate.
Gotcha. So you got appointed as that 31 back in 1995, and you were practicing. So this is a criminal case, right? You've done criminal and civil work, but
yes.
Can you talk about what happened and how you became involved? What's the original crime, the victim, the circumstances, and then how you got involved?
I got involved by being appointed by the court. But I actually was in court the day that he was arraigned, the day that this picture on the front page, on the front cover, was taken. That is his arraignment picture. He was 15 years old. He was a very, very young 15. And when I met him, I was just overwhelmed really with how he was not street savvy at all. I did a lot of juvenile delinquency work, and I knew a lot of kids from Somerville, and this kid lived in a very protected neighborhood. It was almost out of the 1950s, people stayed in their houses for generation after generation. The house that Eddie grew up in was his grandfather's house. His grandfather was the former chief of police of Somerville. He then lived there with his family and his 4 siblings. I think there's 5 of them. And he, played street hockey. And I mean, the kids were in and out of each other's houses, and nobody locked their doors, that kind of thing.
It's like Mayberry or something. Mayberry.
Yeah, exactly like that. And
this is Boston, right? This is Northwest Boston. Is that correct?
It's
kind of a nicer middle class.
A little bit north and a little bit west, but it's on the border of.
Would you say middle or upper middle class, maybe?
I would say middle class. These are not 3-deckers, most of them, but which is a more working class neighborhoods in Somerville. But these are, some of them are old Victorian houses, as I said, that have been handed down generation after generation, as his was. He lived 25 yards away from Janet Downing and the Downing family. He grew up with them. He was in that house since he was, I think, 3 or 4. Ryan Downing was one of the, he had a twin brother named Paul, and Paul and Ryan were the youngest. There were 3 older children, one who was out of the house and had her own child named Carrie Ann, and then Aaron, and I'm not going to remember the third child, but no, it was 4 children. That's it. So it was Aaron, Carrie Ann, and the 2 boys, the twins. He was friends with Ryan, one of the twins, and they'd been best friends forever. And he knew Mrs. Downing since he was a little child. Their parents were friends with Janet. She was a part of that neighborhood, I think, for the past. She had been there 17 years or something, I think, at the time. But she was divorced, and her husband was remarried, and she lived there with the 4 children. And she worked at a medical facility in a clerical position. Eddie's lived across the street. As I said, it's exactly 25 yards diagonally across the street. And they were, and there was a whole group of boys that hung around together. And the night of this happened, Eddie had never been in trouble before. He had no criminal record. He had never been arrested. He was basically a very young 15. They were all together in the Downing house, the boys, at about 6:37, and they were talking about what they were going to do. It was really brutally hot night, humid, and they all said they wanted to go swimming. Ed was kind of a big kid, and he didn't like to go swimming, and so he decided not to go. And the other kids left to go swimming. The 4 other kids left to go swimming, and he went over to his house. His father was sitting on the front porch. At that time, they had 2 really small children. He had a sister who was 3 and a brand new baby that was 3 months. So he was sitting there with those children and a neighbor and the neighbor's children, and Eddie was with them. And they were, talking, and he was giving the kids popsicles and, helped one of the kids. One of the kids didn't want to go home, so he put him on his shoulders, and he took him across the street so he could take him home. And it was directly after this scene that I'm creating that the district attorney alleges that Eddie O'Brien savagely murdered his best friend's mother for no reason. So there's an immediate question in my mind of why could you even conceive of that? Well, you have to sort of understand the political atmosphere in Boston at the time. And we had an administration that was trying to change the juvenile laws, which had been more toward rehabilitating youths and getting them back into society rather than punishing. And we had a governor who wanted kids to be, what did he say, cracking rocks. I mean, he wanted adult time for adult crimes. And there was a whole movement in the nation about super predators, young teenagers marauding through cities that had no conscience and no morals, and they were going to murder innocent people. And basically,
didn't Biden give that speech in the 90s where he talked about super predators, or was it Clinton or something? I remember some Congression,
Hillary Clinton did, yeah. Right. And so it was on the agenda it was a big fear-mongering campaign, and basically it was intended to incarcerate inner city Black and brown youths. But in Boston, we had such a history of racism since busing took place, and it's a very divided city racially, and so the two politicians knew that they needed a suspect to pass this law who was not going to raise any issues of racism. So when Eddie, what really happened was that Eddie was with his father all that time, and then he decided he was going to go to Burger King, which was down the hill, and he had to go by Janet's house, and he decided to stop and see if Ryan was home yet. He knocked on the window, which is what he always did for Ryan, and he thought he heard something, and the door was open. The vestibule door there was a sort of a vestibule, and then an inner door that opened to the inside. That door was open. He walked in, and he saw Janet lying to his right, lying on the dining room floor. And he knelt down and he said, Janet, are you okay? The water was running straight down the hall. There was a bathroom. The bathroom door was open. The water was running in that sink, and it was overflowing. And Janet was on the floor, and he went to Janet. He turned her over, and he saw that she'd been stabbed 98 times. So it was really a bloodbath. And he immediately stood up and he started backing out of the room, and a man approached him from behind and with a knife, and he had a stocking on his face. And so Eddie could not recognize him. And and just at that moment, not Ryan, but two of the other boys came to Ryan's house to see if he was home as well, and knocked on the door just at that moment. And he said to Eddie, close that door. And so Eddie backed up to the door and pushed it closed. And then he said, I know who you are. I know where you live. And I'll kill your whole family if you tell anybody about this. Now get out of here. And so Eddie, not being able to run out the front door because his friends were there, he ran out. He ran through the kitchen, down the cellar. The cellar door was wide open. He ran straight out the cellar door and fell into the sticker bushes behind the house. He was terrified. And he jumped out of there, and it was dark out. It was he left his house at about 9:10, and the boys or 9:15, and the boys knocked on the door about 9:20, and so there was a really, really short window that he was alleged to have inflicted all of these wounds. And at the theory of the Commonwealth's case was also that he dressed her and undressed her, and that was because her bra had knife marks in it that didn't match up with the wounds. I think that there's other reasons that could be true, but that was his theory at the time. And the fight had been up and down the stairway, going up to the second floor. There was blood on the stairway, blood on the wall, blood they'd gone through the living room, through the hallway, through the dining room. So she really fought for her life.
So it was really a savage event, like overkill.
It was beyond savage. It was overkill like few people have ever seen. And so that's Eddie
the case.
Eddie had a white T-shirt on over the rim, Nike shirt. It was on inside out. He'd had it on all day. Everybody testified to that. He had not one drop of blood on him. I mean, you would be saturated in blood if you were perpetrating that crime. Your hair, your eyelashes, you'd never get it out from under your fingernails. And
right,
so
99 stab wounds, like up and down the stairs.
Yeah.
So it's not like in your mind you're thinking this happened in one spot. It's that somebody's moving from the second floor to the first floor or something like that.
That's right.
While being stabbed, yeah. So.
Exactly. And so she's got stab wounds everywhere, in her head, and a lot in her chest, her back, her legs, her arms. She looks, the autopsy photos would suggest she was also beaten, and she had many bruises on her. So Ed continued to go down the street. His friends saw him or thought they saw him, and they called to him, but he didn't turn around. He just kept going because he didn't know what this killer was going to do next. If he was going to run out the back door behind him and stab him, or what was going to happen. And he just wanted to get away from there. And he kept going, and he went into Burger King, which is maybe 2 or 3 blocks away, and he sort of just tried to compose himself. He was scared and shaking. It was, as I said, it was really hot. He splashed water on his face, and then he was walking down toward Union Square, which is where he had a job at a little corner store called Midnight Variety. He would fill the drink coolers and candy bar things, and also put the papers together on Sunday morning before church, because his church, where he was an altar boy, was right across the street there at St. Joe's. So while he's walking down toward Midnight Variety, trying to figure out what he's supposed to do or should do, he is confronted by 2 youths who say, "Give me all your money," and he reached in his pocket. He gave them $17. One of the kids pulls out a knife and lurches toward him. He grabs the knife, cuts his hand, and goes into the store. And they say to him, "What's the matter with you? You look like you've just eaten a bad pizza." And he said, "These kids just jumped me." And he said, "I think I got cut on my hand." And so the owner called the police. Eddie didn't call the police. The owner called the police, and then handed Eddie the phone. And Eddie had no intention of reporting being jumped to the police. But anyway, that got reported to the police. Meanwhile, the police, Janet's body had just been discovered by her son. Ryan finally came home at about 5:10, and with his rollerblades on, rolled into the dining room, and saw his mother dead on the floor. He screamed. He went right over to the O'Brien house, which was like his second home. He found Mr. O'Brien. He said, "Something's the matter with my mother. There's blood everywhere. You've got to come." And Mr. O'Brien called the police, ran across the street, and waited for the police, and tried to preserve. I mean, at this point, there were neighbors coming in and things like that. And he was trying to keep people out so that the murder scene was not contaminated, but he wasn't very successful at that. And when the police got there, they did nothing to keep it from being not contaminated. EMTs came in. There were 17 people in and out of that room before it got cordoned off. So the blood evidence got very compromised, if you ask me. But at any rate, they were the district attorney was there, and the police responded. The CPAC unit was on its way. That's the state police who are attached to the district attorney's office, who investigate homicides. And when the district attorney heard that Eddie O'Brien was down in Union Square and he had a cut on his hand, he immediately said, "He's a suspect." At that moment, before he had seen Eddie, before he had talked to anybody, before he had anybody analyze the scene, before Janet was removed from the house. And so the police didn't think Eddie's hand needed any medical attention. And they called Ed's father and Eddie's father and told him that. And he said, "Great, can you please bring him home?" And they drove him up and brought him home in the cruiser. And Eddie got in the house, and his grandfather said, "You really should have a tetanus shot." And so his uncle was there. He said, "I'll take him up for a tetanus shot." He took him up to the hospital for a tetanus shot, and the state police arrived. And that they don't investigate muggings, okay? So, but Eddie had no idea that they were there investigating him. And so the minute, we're talking not even a half an hour after the murder, or just Janet was pronounced dead at 10:39, and this is probably like 11 o'clock. they're asking to swab the scratches on his legs that he got from the bushes. So,
So
yeah.
he was basically like what you're saying is he was tunnel vision for Eddie O'Neill or Eddie O'Brien. Sorry.
Eddie O'Brien, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like a gift from heaven for the district attorney, because he was running for attorney general and he had like 7 or 8 unsolved murders, and he was getting a lot of flack for that. And he immediately saw that this would be the perfect case to frame up to change these laws and jumpstart his political career for attorney general. He had been a district attorney for 8 years.
Right, and that's a key element of this case, is that Eddie O'Brien was 15, right? So was he going to be tried as an adult, or was he going to be tried as a juvenile, which would have had a completely different outcome if he was tried as a juvenile, correct?
Yes, absolutely. But they were, as I said, they were trying to pass this law, and so that what happened was the law was not passed yet, so he did go through the juvenile system because that was the process they had at the time. And during the course of the things that went on in those 2 proceedings, he went on and he had the juvenile transfer hearing, whether he should be transferred to adult court or not. And the judge heard that for days and days and days, and he issued findings that even if he committed this murder, he certainly was somebody who could be rehabilitated. He showed absolutely no mental illness, no defect. He had no behavior that suggested he would have done this. He had no history of being aggressive. As a matter of fact, he was a big kid, a tall kid, and he was, I think, maybe
no history of violence, right? No history of violence.
I'm sorry?
No history of violence.
No history of violence. I was just going to say, as a matter of fact, he had just finished his freshman year at Don Bosco, which is a Catholic high school in Boston, and he didn't make the football team. I mean, he could have just stood there and been a block, but he didn't make the football team because he wasn't aggressive enough.
Right. And so then this happens in 1995. And then, like you said, the 1996 Juvenile Justice Reform Act is passed, right? After this.
Well, what happened was he was kept, the judge that heard his case said he should be kept as a juvenile, meaning the district attorney lost a juvenile case. He tried it himself. He hadn't tried a case in 8 years because he's in an elected office, and he's got hundreds of district attorneys who try the cases. He tried the case himself. He had a press conference every day, and he lost. So he appealed to the Supreme Judicial Court, and he asked that the judge be removed. And they remanded the case and removed the judge. And if you read the book, you'll find out how that happened. And it was not on the up and up. And he was told to change his opinion by the higher up judges, change his opinion, or he would be taken off the case. And he refused to change his opinion. He had integrity. And so they put another judge on it, and it was very clear to everybody that Eddie was going to adult court now, it was just so clear that that's what happened, that Riley got his judge. That's what the district attorney's name was, Tom Riley. So he went to adult court, and he was convicted he was arraigned in adult court in May. He was tried in September. I don't think any other murder case has ever had that little a time to prepare for an adult murder case of this magnitude. And they asked for more time. They were not given more time. They needed experts to be retained, and they gave them no leeway whatsoever. He was convicted on October 1st of 1997, after a 2-week trial, convicted of murder. And in the meantime, the governor had pushed this new legislation. It had passed, and so Eddie was it's called the Eddie O'Brien law, because what happened was that anybody over 14 who commits murder automatically goes to adult court now. This has changed again. It got repealed pretty quickly, but could be sentenced to life without parole. So a 15-year-old kid who was 15 at the time, he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. The first youth to be sentenced under that law. Now, if
do you know how many people have been sentenced under that law since it passed in 96?
I think 60 some. I don't have the exact number, but what happened was in 2011, which would be 15 years later, 10 years later, he was 97 to 2011. 2011, in a U.S. Supreme Court case regarding the state of Alabama, the Supreme Court ruled that sentencing a juvenile under the age of 18 to a life without parole was cruel and abusive punishment against.
So it was unconstitutional. It's cruel and unusual punishment.
Yes,
right?
it's ruled unconstitutional, and it violates the Eighth Amendment against cruel and unusual punishment. And so everybody got reclassified at that time. And Eddie was the last one to get reclassified. It's been sort of that kind of, it's one thing, it's been one hurdle after the next for this kid. But he was reclassified to murder with the possibility of parole after 15 years served. Well, he had already served 15 years by the time that was overturned, but he never applied for parole because in Massachusetts, you have to admit guilt in order to get parole. And so,
right. He's always maintained his innocence from
that's
the
right.
get-go.
That's right. And so it was, he waived parole the first 2 times he was eligible for it. After the first time he was eligible, and then 5 years later, the second time he was eligible. And he said, he would not, there was no way that he was going to admit to a crime he didn't commit. And he would rather spend his life in jail than admit to a crime he didn't commit. And so things began to change. Massachusetts took that law and it changed Massachusetts law back to what it used to be, and then expanded it so that under the Mattis decision, anybody between the ages of 14 and 22 now, they're called emerging adults. 17 to 21 is called emerging adults. 14 to 17 are called juveniles. Cannot be sentenced to life without parole. And it's the Youthful Offender Act, and they can be tried in juvenile court or in adult court, but their sentencing is that kind of sentencing is prohibited. And so effectively the law was repealed while Eddie is still in jail. But when they repealed that, and they started letting people go who had committed murders when they were juveniles, and who admitted that they committed the murders, but they started paroling them. And several had been paroled, and then one got paroled who was claiming innocence, and they actually paroled him. And so Eddie thought, well, maybe things are changing, and he did have a parole hearing last year. So he wasn't paroled, but he was given a 3-year date for his next parole hearing.
Right, so he can go back to the parole hearing
usually
next year.
It's a 5-year wait.
Okay.
But they gave him a 3-year wait because he has a motion was supposed to have been filed by now. The attorneys didn't get it in when we had hoped it would be in, but he's got a motion for a new trial now. That's based on all of the evidence that we have collected over the last 10 years, that in addition to the fact that there was no blood on him and so little forensic evidence putting him at the scene, although there were 3 spots of blood, there was a lot of problems with the blood evidence that we found out in the 10 years intervening that we got FOIA requests, Freedom of Information requests from the lab, and compared the lab notes and the lab results with the reports that were given to the court, and they don't match. So they were telling the court there were matches when there weren't. And so there is,
that should overturn the verdict right away if they're
one would think
manipulating
so.
evidence. Yeah.
One would think so.
So he's like a political football too, and so all these laws are changing as he's in court. Like all the stuff, there was Diatchenko. That's the 2013 Massachusetts ruling, right?
Right.
So
right.
it's unconstitutional, and he's in there, but he won't say. I mean, he could say, "Okay, I did it," and then get out, but then he would be admitting to this horrible, horrible crime.
Yeah.
And it's the timeline too is a problem. So they based upon what people saw of him, he would have had to have like committed this crime within such a small period of time.
And he would have been covered in blood when he walked into the store. You know, he had no blood on him. As I said, he had a white T-shirt on. He had on all day.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, blood spatter evidence and stuff like that. It's pretty well done. Like when people's heart are pumping, the blood comes out. It's like, yeah, it's pretty wild. So he's there. He's stuck in prison. He's been denied parole, and
we're
a lot
waiting
of these people
on
have
the
moved on.
motion
Right?
we're waiting on the motion for a new trial, and hopefully that will be granted. And we're doing a big fundraising campaign this summer to try to get the money that it's going to take a lot of experts to explain this DNA evidence and what's wrong with it. And we have them. But we have to pay them, you know. So we're trying to raise funds for that. And Eddie, in the meantime, Eddie has become a jailhouse lawyer. I mean, he knows as much law as I do right now. And he decided to start his own what's it called? The webpage. It's called thetruthabouteddieobrien.com. And he has posted on that all of the police reports, all of the forensic reports. You can read, he's got a whole timeline on there. He's got everything. You can read all the actual documents yourself. And that's what he's always said. They say to him, "How can you prove your innocence?" And he said, "If you follow the evidence, you'll get your answer. Just follow the evidence." And it's true.
It's pretty incredible. And they fashioned this whole narrative that he's a 15-year-old kid with this dark obsession about his friend's mom, right?
Yeah, no, and which was not.
That's the motive.
They got what they got in a trial was they got each of the twins to say that he had once said he saw Janet undressing in her bedroom window, which he did not say and did not do, and they claimed it was from his bedroom window, which has no clear sight to her bedroom window. There's a big tree, first of all, and her window's on the other side of the house. So it's not that visible from his bedroom window. What did happen was he and another young man were sitting on their porch, the O'Brien porch, maybe a year or two before this, and they saw a woman undressing in a window down the street, and they both, were giggling about that, and the twins knew about that, but that was testimony that was elicited that just was not true. And one of his friends said that Eddie once said, "Your mother is a terrible cook." Well, Eddie's mother's an incredible cook, so I'm not surprised that he said that. And he's a guy who likes his food, So those were his obsessions with her.
Were their houses adjacent to each other?
Yes, Janice owned a duplex. It had a party wall. They shared a wall, and at 8:15, the party wall, the people who lived there, they were changing a baby at the dining room table, which is right next to the stairwell that they their stairs and that wall are joined, and they heard somebody coming down the stairs like they had fallen all the way down the stairs. And they said, "Oh my God, what was that?" And they all stopped, and then they didn't hear anything, and that was at 8:15. So it's very conceivable because the boys left at 7:30, and then the other twin came home at 8 o'clock and was in the house for a half an hour. He finally testified. He testified to many different times during his testimonies, but he was there from 8 to 8:30, and so he was in the house when this happened, and it was never brought up in court. It was never. It was never said. But I think the most important part of this is that the DNA evidence that was taken from Janet's fingernails, underneath her fingernails, she fought for her life, had another male, unidentified male DNA, and Eddie was excluded from the DNA under her nails. Eddie was excluded from the DNA on the murder weapon, but there was a male DNA on that murder weapon that they didn't bother to run through APHIS to see if they could get a match.
But weren't they saying that that was his knife that was used in the murder, and that he was lurking around the bushes on the day of the evening, like there were testimony?
They said all of those things. They never proved it was his knife. They proved he had a knife like it. They never found the knife. They only found the hilt of the knife. And so they, but there was DNA on the hilt of that knife because it had gone into Janet several times, and there was DNA that was Janet and another man, and it was not Eddie. So, and DNA evidence, we're talking, this is right after OJ. DNA evidence is brand new.
Right.
So
this is so
just
long
recently
ago.
admissible in court. And so the attorney who handled this case really didn't have any idea about how to challenge DNA, and didn't have an expert, didn't have a blood expert, didn't have anybody to test. They divide the evidence in half, so each party could do their own testing. He never tested anything on his own. He really, really failed Eddie as much as the police failed Eddie in not investigating anybody else.
Right. So
one of the things about the basement was that there were supposedly a thumbprint of Eddie's down there near a drop of blood. It didn't say on it. And but he
was in the house, so that's obvious it would be there, right?
I'm sorry.
Eddie was in the house because he was friends with the son, so he was there all the time.
And he touched Janet. Yeah, he probably did have her blood on his fingertips, but this is very contrived. The stuff in the base. The only thing that was found upstairs was the fingerprints that he left when he pushed the door closed. When the guy with the knife told him to close the door, he pushed the door closed, and those were in Janet's blood, his fingerprints. That's consistent with his story.
It's a disconcerting case, yeah.
Well, sure. Wrongful convictions take a failure of the whole system, and here they identified him as a suspect before she was even pronounced dead, okay? And they arrested him 24 hours later. What did they have at that point? They had a swab from his leg, which they determined was AB blood, and he was B blood. He was O blood, but it was AB blood, but they didn't test it any further, and they could have, to see if it was Janet's AB blood. Okay?
Right.
And they just chose not to do any further testing. And when they got the initial results back of the fingernail DNA not coming back to Ed, the district attorney said, stop all testing. and he refused to have it tested. And he did the same thing with the hilt of the knife until weeks before the adult trial started. Then he sent it to a lab to get tested. But he knew Eddie was not going to be on them. And if we had had those results in the juvenile session, the judge would never have been removed because it would have shown his innocence there.
Wow.
So there's a lot of prosecutorial misconduct. There's a failure of the police to investigate anything. And Janet had spent 9 hours of her life with the woman next door, talking about how afraid she was of Artie Ortiz, and that he had been following her, and that weird things were happening, and things were disappearing in her house that were important to her, and she felt that he was getting access to her house, and she had thrown him out. He had lived with her for a year. Her sister and Artie had lived there with their baby because they were homeless, and he never gave the keys back. And Janet was at work every day, but Gina, who was this neighbor, was home every day. And Gina said, "He's there every day. I see him there every day." And
so he's there when she's not there.
Oh yeah. And she threw him out. Janet threw him out because he was dealing drugs out of the basement to the neighborhood kids. And we have had the neighborhood kids talk about how he dealt drugs to them. That's not in any way a question. He sold them joints. He sold cocaine out of his cab, and he kept it in the basement. And Janet found it, and she kicked them out. So he knew how that basement worked, and anyway, yeah.
I mean, and then wow. So there's just all kinds of weird stuff. Like there's weird stuff about them, but they just didn't look into it. That's the other.
They
refused
to interview the Reckleys who heard somebody fall down the stairs at 8:15.
Right.
They refused to interview Gina Mahoney, who had spent the last 9 hours of her life with her. They refused. Yeah. They said, "We have all we need."
Right. So they were done. It's called
they
tunnel vision.
Yeah. They had the white altar boy.
They had what they wanted. They wanted somebody to.
Exactly. They didn't want any confusion about that there might be another. They didn't want another suspect to investigate.
Wow. So that goes back to the title of the book, right? The Power and Politics.
Exactly. That's a little capsule of it.
Murder case. Yes, and there's a lot in the book. Like your book is very thorough, right? I mean, you've got like 400 pages, footnotes, stuff like that. People can check it out.
Absolutely, absolutely. I attended every hearing he was ever in at the time. I've been in this case for 31 years. I've been in touch. I kept in touch with him. I've been in touch with his family over the 31 years, and it was Eddie who asked me to write the book. He said, I can live with the fact that I'm going to die in this prison, but I can't live with the fact that people think I murdered her. Can you please write the book and tell people what really happened? I'd never written a book, nor did I aspire to write one. But I said I would, and I did. And
there's your website too, so people can check it out at thepoliticsofmurder.com, right?
That's it.
So that's it. So people can go and find out about the book. You can also get it on Amazon, Wild Blue Press. Margo, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for sharing all that information.
At the 45-minute mark. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to add or anything I missed before we wrap up?
No, just, check out the websites. And if you're inclined after you read the book, we could use all the support we can get, either moral or financial. We'll take whatever you have to give.
And that is the best place to contact you, at thepoliticsofmurder.com. Is that the best place to reach you?
Absolutely. You can contact me through that, and you can contact me through Margo Nash author @gmail.com.
So that's your email address. And
Yep.
then Eddie's is thetruthabouteddieobrien.com.
Exactly.
So
all the official reports are on there.
Great. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. The full title of the book is, again, right here, The Politics of Murder, the Power and Ambition Behind the Altar Boy Murder Case. And that's an updated and expanded edition. And the guest and author again is Margo Nash. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, stay there. Okay.